All right. What's good, everybody? This is Sam Boy. And look, I'm fucked up. And I also just recently discovered this new political ideology, one of these online political ideology tests. You know, no different than like one of these like personality tests or like the Myers-Briggs or something, or like one of those astrology tests or, you know, your sign. And I've never been somebody that took them too seriously, but it was actually pretty fundamental in just introducing me to different ideas, or at least giving a different perspective on ideas. And combined with my own curiosity and interest in this stuff, the two worked, it really just reinforced one another to encourage me to continue to understand more about the way that I think and understand the way that other people think, so that way it can better facilitate, exchanges of ideas, or not if I feel as if there aren't any good ones being offered. But in any case, of the tests that I've taken, I've done 8 values. Of course, there's some more basic, like 2-dimensional left versus right tests, or 2-dimensional, where it's just the x-axis and y-axis. I mean, overall, I always fit pretty well in the quote-unquote like socially liberal and like left-wing economic titles, just different variations. Some they'll have me more as like a socialist, or you want like communal style anarchy, or you want like just a bigger welfare government with less like military interventions and like intelligence gathering and stuff like that. So in general, that's why I tend to say, if you ask me in person, off the cuff, I'll just be like, I'm a lefty in general, just depending on the issue and the situation. And what I know, I may be a lefty by an inch or a yard or a mile. It just depends. But I tend to always lean in the direction of social liberalism, of, left-wing economic theory and whatnot, which is basically, just about concerning the welfare of the people and the people and the environment, and internationalism, which just basically means looking at people who are not citizens in my country as deserving of the same amount of humanity, not privileges exactly, not all privileges though, but the same level of humanity and dignity that that I have, So that's basically it. Like I said, I'm really fucked up right now, but I still wanted to do this, create some content, and so here we go. Let's not waste any more time. Politiscales, Politiscales. Let's do this. So question 1 of 117. Oh yeah, one more thing. This has the most amount of questions of the, I guess, like the pop political science ideology tests. There's another one I'll do called 8 values, and I think that had maybe half as many questions. But that's the great thing about these tests, because once again, it just helps give you, no two tests are going to rely on the same metrics and give the same weight to different categories, or give you the different options of responding. So that's why I enjoy it, just giving me a barometer of where all these different ideas and points of view stand, and maybe helping me to take my understanding of an issue to another level. So let's do this. Question 1. It is necessary to implement assemblies to ration our production to the consumers according to their needs. Now, I'm really drawn into those last few handful of words, according to their needs. But then I also think about, it says, production for the consumers. And I serve tables for quite a bit. And just my understanding of how people act when they're in the role of a consumer, the consumer is not always right, and this feeding into just perpetual growth for the sake of economy, I'm not really with that. But it says that it's necessary to implement assemblies to ration our production to the consumers according to their needs. You know what? I'm going to take this as? I'm going to take this as we limit production to what people need, and we don't try to create this, just this grand surplus of goods and services for the sake of the just economic prosperity. because oftentimes that just means prosperity for a handful of people. So I promise I won't take so long to answer all these questions, but this is a good one. And I also noticed when I took the test before, this was not the first question. So I'm sure that like some questions that are probably static and some other ones kind of rotate. So my response may or may not actually match the last one. And I have a screenshot of it, so we'll go over that too. But in any case, moving ahead, it is necessary to I'm just going to ignore these two words, implement assemblies. It is necessary to ration our production to the consumers according to their needs. I don't know. It's saying curtailing production according to the needs of the people. But what if people want? I'm neutral on that. I'm neutral. I'm not sure. I'm neutral or hesitant to say. No one should get rich from owning a business, housing, or land. I absolutely disagree with that. Now, I absolutely disagree with that. I'm going to avoid trying to get too nuanced on these issues because there's a lot of questions and they're going to sometimes address the same issue but from different perspectives. So we can go into the nuance afterwards. So if you're like, oh, wow, I really wasn't expecting that response. Okay, well, just kind of deal with it and I'll probably have an explanation for it at the end. A language is defined by its users, not by scholars. I disagree. It's a bit of both, and it's important to have, to recognize the formal and informal value of doing things in any context. Humans should neither eat nor exploit animals. I mean, look, I'm a meat eater. I'm always going to eat meat. I don't find anything to be immorally reprehensible about it. And as far as like exploiting animals, if by exploit you mean not use them for any purposes, like other than providing like sustenance, I wouldn't agree with that either. It's like I don't wear fur, but I also don't tell people they shouldn't wear fur. Like I said, I'm a meat eater, but I also think vegans and vegetarians have a really good argument. I'm saying for that. I like the idea of there not being. I've never been a fan of zoos. You know what I'm saying? For different reasons when I was a kid and then as an adult. I just kind of didn't care for them, didn't think they were that interesting. But now as an adult, I'm like, just having them there for our amusement. So the thing is, it's kind of iffy. But this thing is saying that like, oh, humans should neither eat nor exploit animals. I mean, if you consider using animals in any capacity that's useful for human interest, then I'm going to have to disagree. I'll just say rather disagree. Loans contracted in the public sphere, say state, regions, collectivities, should not necessarily be refunded. I don't agree with that. That's because the implication of that is, I don't agree with that. Schools should mostly teach our values, traditions, and fundamental knowledge. You know what's interesting is that I just saw a video or heard a podcast that was talking about what like the secondary purpose of school is, which I mean, this is probably not too surprising for people. So of course there's the actual information that we're getting, right? The curriculum. But then there's also the behavioral stuff. There's the conformity, learning how to sit still for hours at a time, learning how to do menial tasks over and over and look for small variations within them. Learning how to, work in groups with people you may or may not really enjoy working with, etc. Right? So the thing is, I don't know if this is just saying this as like, oh, values and traditions in like a traditional, like a nationalistic, jingoistic, fashion, or if it's just like, well, you know what? I'm just going to go off of how things are and not get too much in how I think things ought to be or how things could be better. I'm going to look at how things, overall how they are and how my experience and what most other people's experience is. So should schools mostly teach our values, traditions, and fundamental knowledge? I'm going to say somewhat agree because overall I really appreciate some of the values that I have learned from teachers and whatever it was, the things I have been able to skim from traditional curriculum. Research produced by my country should not be available to other countries. I disagree, and I'm going to just say rather disagree because, of course, there's nuances. Of course, like if we discover a new weapon or something like that, obviously it shouldn't just get into, everybody's hands or, any type of like sensitive information. But at the same time, if it's something like, you discover a new medical technology or an improvement in engineering or something like that, of course, like give that to people. So, overall, I'm going to say disagree. Mass strike is a good way to acquire new rights. Absolutely. It is merit that explains differences of wealth between two individuals. Absolutely disagree. We do not live in a meritocracy. And while there may be, moments in your life, in everyone's life, no matter how privileged or not privileged you may be, is that there will always be judgments made about you that aren't based around your individual character, around your track record against, that we mostly just see each other as stats, as statistics, numbers on the page, or we just go off of the superficial elements of how a person presents themselves, because we just don't have the time usually and the interest, let's be honest, of learning dozens of people's backstory throughout every interaction throughout our days. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about that. Think about how many people you actually pass by if you actually had to have even a 30-second, meaningful exchange with them. What else would we have time for? Anyway, we're going to pick up here. I know we're only on question 10. I'm going to pick up. Market economy is optimal when it is not regulated. Fuck no! That's part of the reason why we're in the mess we're in. Multiculturalism is a threat to our society. Nope! It is most certainly not. That's like saying biodiversity is bad for like the jungle or bad for like the ecosystem. Environmental norms should be influenced by mass consumption and not from authority. I'm gonna say disagree, and because even if the consumers are in the right here, you still need coordination at a different level, and there's insights that come from being in a place of authority and having a different burden than the collective. And once again, like I said, this irks me wrong because of the customer is always right, as if, saying everything that the general public wants is inherently good, because that's simply not the case. Even we're talking about environmental norms, they shouldn't be guided simply by mass consumption. Because most people are not specialists in that arena or keep up with that information. Wage labor is a form of theft from the worker by companies. I'm gonna say disagree. I'm not even though I use the term Marxism, and I'm gonna, I reference like communism and socialism, a lot of different left-wing economic way that we organize. I am not like a strict like communist, like private. Like, I don't have market economy, you know what I'm saying, does bring value that doesn't come from the public sector. And there's some things that you want to be able to do that maybe wouldn't be allowed by the public, by the general public. You know what I'm saying? It's like always having to get a permission slip from the community, you know what I'm saying, to do certain things. It's like always having to go get a permission slip from the general public on what drugs you can put in your body. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, there should be regulations on, like, if you're going to go and drive a car or something, or operate heavy machinery, stuff like that. I get that. But just as far as like, I can't, do drugs, you know what I'm saying, in my own crib, it's like, back up. I guess maybe that's just my, my libertarian streak that's still present from high school. But in any case, no, there's always going to be a need for the private sector, market economy. It's just that it's way too rampant and needs to be reined in. So I absolutely disagree. Sometimes you just want a simple job where you don't have to think too hard and just get a simple wage. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there should always be a place for that. Homosexuals should not be treated equally to heterosexuals with regard to marriage, filiation, adoption, or procreation. I don't know what filiation is, but the other three I know, so I'm not even going to worry about it. And funny enough, I got this question much later when I initially took the test. So this is just reaffirming that they shuffle the questions and throw in they mix them up, which I appreciate that. And what's interesting about this question is that this is something that would really fuck me up when I was younger, because it's like because it's asking for things in a negative fashion. Because take out the one word not, right? Homosexuals should be treated equally, right? The blah blah blah. But then you add in homosexuals should not be, and then when you look at the choices, because just from the words homosexuals should not be, and you would think, oh no, you give a very, very strong reaction. So this question was not framed very well. But in any case, I do not agree with the notion that homosexuals should not be treated equally to heterosexuals with regards to like marriage, adoption, or procreation. I disagree with that idea. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is a necessity in order to be protected from terrorist acts. Like, I know this isn't a vague question. It's pretty straightforward, but it's like, I don't believe in I guess really I don't believe in 100% privacy. I don't believe in 100% privacy. I also don't believe in 100% transparency, right? But when it actually comes to stopping terrorist attacks and whatnot, it's given what we know is that they already over-survey, they over-police certain areas, and the thing is, they oftentimes spend more money just to survey these groups, and then nothing happens. So given the track record of how we know all these different intelligence agencies and the police and all these different security forces, how much of it just seems to be about terrorizing people and throwing their weight around in different areas of life, I'm going to say no, because it seems like even with like terrorism and acts of violence domestically and stuff internationally, go down and shit, they continue to get their budgets up and ask to curb more civil liberties, and yet less shit is happening by these outside forces. But there's always like the police or security forces or military fucking something up. So I'm actually going to adamantly disagree with that. Violence against individuals is never productive. Disagree. This is also a reason why I'm a lefty that's also pro-gun. Yep. Quote, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. This question, see, with this, of course we have the social construct of womanhood and a woman's identity, right? But there's also not denying that there are innate differences to people based on our gender, based on biology. And no, just becoming a certain age and going through certain processes, that doesn't disqualify you, shouldn't disqualify you as a woman, but it does have value. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that being a woman is simply, the thing is, yes, that the performance of being a woman, yes, is that what we go off of. And that can be your definition of womanhood. And your definition of womanhood can also be that, maybe you don't cater to the quote unquote performance or cater to the gaze of what is considered womanly, but you have a very strong, sense of womanhood, saying whatever that means for you. And you're cisgendered, like you feel, saying comfortable born in the body that you are. So, I mean, I kind of feel like it's one of those things where, both have value. So to say that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, I'm kind of neutral on it. I'm kind of neutral. It's like, if somebody tells me they identify as a woman, I'll be like, I believe you, and, I'm saying more power to you. And then if somebody else is like, and then I meet like a born woman, you know what I'm saying? If somebody who's not born a woman, they say that I identify as a woman, it's like, hey, I hear you, I feel you. You know what I'm saying? And then if you say that you are, you're like born woman, cisgender, and then, but you have a really strong, sense of womanhood, whatever that means for you, then it's like, I also take, saying your word. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where it's like the internal is as valid as the external. You know what I'm saying? But for different reasons. Anyway, I said we're going to be moving along. Stop distracting me with your sexy selves, all you out there. We need to make compromises with the opposition to apply our ideas. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's always going to play out because you're never going to agree 100% with anybody on anything. So, in any situation. So, the filing and storage of personal records should be delimited strictly, and database cross-checking should be forbidden. This question fucked me up earlier when I first took the test, because you see the word delimited and you're thinking, okay, that's the opposite of limited. But then why would they say delimited strictly? Like what, open it up strictly? Like break down the barrier strictly and database cross-checking. But then I looked it up, and so it's one of those words where like flammable and inflammable both mean the same thing. So limited and delimited mean the same thing. And I'm just like, why the hell? Like, yeah, this was not worded very well, or I don't know if this is like Canadian or some shit, or who wrote this, but like, don't do that shit. Let's get in the habit of just using one word, you know what I'm saying, to describe shit. We don't need delimited and limited to mean the same fucking thing. This is stupid. But in any case, the filing and storage of personal records, basically, it should be limited strictly, and database cross-checking should be forbidden. I do not agree with that. Dude, the world is big, and there's a lot of fucking people in it, and you're not always going to be able to sit and bargain and talk and convince them to not do some wild shit. And some people you got to keep tabs on, like, and that's just, that is what it is. There's always going to be a need for, like, maybe we don't have, like, we want to call them police officers or security or military and shit, but we're going to always need people who can do that shit. Just because we want to do things peacefully doesn't mean everybody else is going to want to. And what are you going to do when that moment comes up? So it is unfair to set a minimal penalty for an offense or a crime. At first, what I was thinking is I was like, I thought I was agreeing with that. Because in general, I'm just go on a case by case basis. And of course you would think, oh, murder will get a stricter penalty than another, crime or whatnot. Shoplifting without any violence. Well, I guess shoplifting implies nonviolence. But then I started thinking, like, okay, well, what if you were to start the justice system from scratch, right? Just vacate everybody in there and just start anew and start it over tomorrow, right? Somehow miraculously. I said you would still have precedent that gets set. Because whatever your moral boundaries are, whatever you think the law is, you're going to want that to be established as the norm, right? So even if it isn't literally written down into stone, you're going to want that accepted as the precedent that other judges base their decisions off of. So to say that it's unfair to set a minimal penalty for an offense or a crime, that's just a matter of who's deciding what is the crime is. So I'm actually going to say disagree. We need to establish a monarchy to federate the people and preserve our sovereignty. Fuck no. My country must pay for the damages caused by the crimes it committed in other countries. Abso-fucking-lutely. Foreigners living in my country should be allowed to act politically equally to those who have the nationality. No. There still needs to be a process of naturalization and vetting, on you. Now I'm not with this whole, like, calling people illegal immigrants. People are not illegal. Just because you cross the border, that is a minor offense, and it's not something I'd even arrest you for. If I had a say in that shit, there would be no people in cages at the border and shit. But there still needs to be asylum, a vetting process, background checks, and all that stuff. That stuff still has value, because not everybody is just fleeing their respective, nations for the same reason. Exploitation of fossil fuels is necessary. As far as operating things at the capacity that we know them as, I'm going to agree, just because a lot of people really don't contend with the fact that that to drop down production, that to completely cut off, like, the use of, like, plastics and petroleum and stuff like that would naturally mean reducing production and not having so many, like, disposable goods and shit just readily available. And so that also means cutting back on certain luxuries and indulgences in our everyday life, like, straight up. And I don't think a lot of people, even on the left wing, really contend with that fact. It's one thing to talk about, using all the different sources of energy, which I am completely for. But it's there's always going to be a certain level of exploitation, y'all. I'm sorry. It's necessary to teach history in order to create a sense of belonging to the nation. No, because of the reasoning of belong to the nation. I avoid nationalism. I'm not a nationalistic person. I appreciate the value, whatever I think are positive values that I picked up from just the general culture and society. But I have just as many, if not more, criticisms on how things could be better. Hold on just a second. All right. Hacking has a legitimate place in political struggle. Yes, sir. We must fight against global warming. Yes, sir. Individuals who get out of prison should be accompanied in their reinsertion. That's such a funny word to use for that shit. That's an interesting word to use. Basically they're saying like to get reacclimated to society. No fucking shit. Like, even if you're gone for just 6 months, there's so much that can happen in 6 months, and your life can be, set back from 6 months. Hell, some people's lives get fucked up just from a weekend in jail, So yes, offshoring and outsourcing are necessary evils to improve production. Yes, because there's no country that can produce all resources and services at the same level. And everybody is not always going to want to cooperate with you, even or give you a fair deal, even when you're trying to do the same, even when you are trying to actually do that on your end of the bargain. Question 30. All right, we should always distance ourselves from protesters who use violence. That's a really sticky, like, case by case issue. Because it's like, on one hand, yeah, is violence necessary sometimes? I mean, yeah. But not everybody, but it's so sensitive, because the thing is, violence can spiral out of control so quickly. So, it is important to encourage an agriculture that maintains a food biodiversity, even if the output is inferior. I love the wording of this question, because it touches on what I just said a little while ago about, if we completely cut off fossil fuels like cold turkey and use of plastics and anything derived from petroleum and whatnot, it's like people have to really contend with the idea that there will be less goods and services available in less quantity. The quality won't be the same. The output won't be the same. And this is going to have a drastic effect on the lives of, it's going to have so many unintended consequences. And, one of the immediate ones is that if you go for more biodiversity, that has its obvious trade-offs. And one of them is the output won't be as high, because you won't be focusing on getting the most out of this one particular group. And I'm with that. One of the things I believe, even if the output is inferior, I absolutely agree. Because one of the things I believe that we need to have an honest conversation about is the population. And it's like, the only real humane way to reduce the population is to make the conditions for people who could possibly procreate, make them better and give them better opportunities and stuff to do than just wanting to go have unprotected sex. Because the birth rate in more advanced countries, where there's more higher level education and there's more available, like, social services and abortion rights and and medical care and stuff like that, and daycare, all that stuff, people are put in less of a bind and don't see their best bet in life, and just having a bunch of kids and hoping that one of them becomes, like, successful and is able to take care of them in their later years. There is a strategy that people play when you see them having just a bunch of kids. They're playing a game of chance, because life is, that's what life is. But, the only humane way to do that is to make life better for people who can procreate, so they feel that they have better things to do than just raise kids. That's simple as that. Changes in an individual's way of life can induce changes in society. I mean, hell, absolutely. Like, yeah, absolutely. You give somebody a grant to be able to go to school, or a chance to, travel the world or, do all these type of things, they can have a different impact on the community than just becoming a parent and working, just a regular job. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but we also can't deny the fact that some people put a lot of stuff off in order to raise children. It just happens. Maintaining strong economic growth should be an objective for the government. I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, no matter what type of government you live in, the government needs to be able to, if anything that happens, we got to be able to take care of stuff. Simple as that. Just checking the phone. Sorry. All right. GMOs should be forbidden outside research and medical purposes. No, that's one of those. There's been a lot of fear mongering about it, but like we've been eating GMOs for decades. You know what I'm saying? Like if you've been around since the 80s, I'm sure the early 90s, you've been, and most of the food that you've consumed is GMOs. And once again, this goes back to like the whole issue of like of people thinking about like, oh, I only eat stuff that's natural, blah blah blah. Dude, I guarantee you, 98% of the stuff you don't know where the hell it's coming from, how it was made. People just buy into labels and shit and are just easily fooled by marketing tricks. Transgender individuals will never ever really be of the gender they would like to be. I disagree. Like I said earlier, I feel like there's value to the internal as well as the external arguments for like gender identity or just a lot of identity stuff in general. It's like I don't feel anything. Yeah. So revenues and capital should be taxed to redistribute wealth. I mean, yeah, and the thing is that does happen to a degree already, but I feel like it should be more so. And if this is framed as the other opposing argument being that revenue and capital should not go towards redistribution or quote unquote handouts, as they like to say, then I adamantly disagree with that opposing argument, which means I agree with this. My religion must be spread as widely as possible. So I'm an atheist, right? But as much as I would like people to operate from a more, now the thing is, not all people who identify as atheist or secular even or just agnostic, I don't agree with I don't agree 100% with anybody. So to just say that, oh, if everybody were to become a non-believer or agnostic or whatever, then all of a sudden we would just get along. It's like, I know there are plenty of people whom they belong to, different religions or group a certain way. And just because of different experiences and things that they learned and being able to converse, and exchange ideas and with other people, naturally became more secular, stepped away from the institution of the church, and so kind of just practiced their religious beliefs but not on a more personal, individual level. So I'm not against, like, I'm not one of these people that's just like, oh, if everybody was atheist or agnostic like me, the world would be a better place. Some things would be better, but you can still be an atheist or agnostic and be a piece of shit, and many are. So I'm actually just gonna say neutral, hesitant on that. Or I'm gonna say disagree, just because I don't like anything that proposes like the outright just superiority of the way that I do things, the way that I think. It is acceptable that some industry sectors are private. Yes, I do believe that a private sector should exist. I see it akin to, like I said, you being able to do things that benefit you that don't necessarily benefit other people, and that also aren't, really having a lot of mitigating damage. Like we all should be allowed to do stuff that other people disagree with if it's not having a huge impact on one another's life. Simple as that. The labor market enslaves workers. No, the labor market exists for a reason, and it's to maintain a certain quality of life for people based on their motivations. And like the thing is, no matter what type of government we have, if you're somebody who identifies strictly as anarchist or communist or socialist or, something like that, or Marxist, I am not somebody who looks at that the exchange of labor for wages in and of itself to be exploitation. There's always going to be a need for like menial jobs, and I have no problems with that. where I stand is about improving the quality of those things and making the super rich, pay a much higher share. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe billionaires should exist. I really don't believe 100 millionaires should exist. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's a whole nother argument. So no, I don't have such a strong take on the labor market as some other left wingers do. Transforming ecosystems durably to increase the quality of human beings is legitimate. Yeah, of course. I mean, if not, then stop living in a house or an apartment or wherever it is that you live, a domicile. Go live, or not. You can't even live in a car. You know what I'm saying? Just go live out in the bare, open. Go live out in the elements. Borders should eventually be abolished. Nah, you're always gonna need some type of border enforcement. Obviously, I don't agree with what's happening like in the U.S. and in many other countries where xenophobia and bigotry just is so rampant. But the idea in and of itself of securing your borders and being aware of who is coming over, yes, locking people in cages or even arresting them, even under the current laws in the United States, it's something that you would get, you should only get like a citation for, and then you add in the moral element of people trying to flee danger and shit. But ugh. Conditions of life in jail should be greatly improved. Yes. Traditions should be questioned. Yes. It is important that health should stay a public matter. Yes. Marriage should be abolished. No. I don't even see myself getting married, and I don't believe in that. Like, if you want to talk about changing laws so that way you don't have to sign a contract with the state in order to provide, certain benefits with another person whom you feel you have a strong connection with, I'm all for that. But abolishing marriage, that's too extreme. It's like I said, as an atheist, I don't think you should abolish religion. You can't, first of all, but I also don't feel like you should go around like closing down all the churches and shit. Just the prosperity gospel. Revolutions will always end up in a bad way. I disagree. They can be very tumultuous and have a lot of unintended consequences, but sometimes you got to revolt. Nuclear fission, when well maintained, is a good source of energy. I agree. The social roles of women and men can partly be explained by biological differences. So, I mean, there is some argument to that, and of course the biggest, or some legitimacy, I think, to that, and of course, like, the biggest one is like, well, if you have a child, your mobility and ability to do certain things is not as effective. So, I can definitely understand that there's a reason why they give preference to maternity leave as opposed to paternity leave, even when both are offered. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna say somewhat agree, because I feel like that it's one of those things where, like, in some instances, yeah, in general, women may have, or just femme identifying people will just have interests, just in general, you know what I'm saying, versus men or masculine identifying people. But I feel like it's kind of more the exception than the rule, and that men and women more or less kind of are into the same shit, or at least, or more or less kind of appreciate the same things, or appreciate different things in the same way. So, armed struggle in a country is sometimes necessary. Yes. Activists must always act in strict accordance with the law. Nope. Foreigners enrich our culture. I'm gonna say somewhat agree. I'm not, once again, just like I said, I don't believe all borders should be abolished. I also don't believe that just because somebody, I don't romanticize, stuff that is different than me. Human beings are human beings, which means some are cool, some are shitheads, and I gotta feel you out. You know what I'm saying? Simple as that. So I'm actually gonna say neutral on that, neutral or hesitant. I'm kind of glad I've only done a few neutral hesitants. The last one I did quite a few more. So I might come out looking even more lefty on this one. Beware. Space colonization is a good solution for supplying the lack of raw material on Earth: iron, rare minerals, fuel, rare metals. I don't know about this. I mean, this was an argument that I made when I was younger, when I was a teenager, that, we need more materials. But now that I'm so much more critical of the exploitative nature of capitalism and the perpetual consumption that it must thrive on, and the waste that comes from that. I'm not really too keen, honestly, on the idea of space colonization, even if it were available to do tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because all we're going to do is carry on the same problems, and the same shit will happen there in who knows how many hundreds of thousands of years. Also, I know there's the argument that space research, well, the thing is, this is pretty singular. It's stating what the purpose is, space colonization for this thing. The whole idea of like there being technologies that come as a result of space exploration that are used in other things like GPS. That's a completely different argument. So in this one, I'm gonna say slightly disagree, just because of the implication on consumption and just perpetuating capitalism in its current form. So dismissals of employees should be forbidden except when it is justified. Now, some people might be confused by this. So I lived in North Carolina, which is a right-to-work state. And the irony of this is one of those Orwellian things used by right-wingers, Republicans, the GOP, because right-to-work, what it means for them is that they can fire you for any reason whatsoever, and you have no recourse. So to me, when I read this question, what I'm saying is that what it is that it is as if this is stating this question to somebody who supports right to work legislation. So I imagine myself telling somebody who supports right to work legislation, where a boss or an employer can fire you for any good reason and you have no recourse. Dismissals of employees should be forbidden except if it is justified. I'm going to say that in an affirmative way. So I'm going to say I agree with that. National chauvinism during sport competitions is not acceptable. I agree. I agree. Nationalism and chauvinism in general. I know that's always going to be present to a certain degree in male-dominated spaces, especially like the military and sports and stuff. But in general, I don't like to promote that shit. I wouldn't promote that shit. The fact that some schools and universities are private is not a problem. I agree. Insurrection is necessary to deeply change society. I agree. The main goal of a couple is to make at least one child. Nope. A good policy is a pragmatic policy without ideology. I disagree with that, just because it's the implication being that good and bad are not attached to the ideology, or that somehow taking a side is a negative thing. Like having a position that you stand on an issue is somehow limiting, or means that you haven't taken in a bunch of different ideas. It's like, no, I've taken in different perspectives. It's just that I've decided what I think is right, or the right or wrong path to go this way or that way. So I don't agree with that, because it's pretending as if ideology isn't attached to people's actions and the way they think, even if they don't consciously identify as a particular ideology. Justice should always take into consideration the context and the past of the condemned and adapt their penalty accordingly. I agree. And the thing is, we already have laws. The thing is, that is already something to take into consideration. We have so many laws. Some of them are pretty flexible. And then, of course, ultimately, the decisions come down to human beings. And oftentimes, when they hand down these sentences and shit, they just come from recommendations or suggestions or precedent, none of which has to be strictly adhered to. So the issue is like, it's getting people who see things the way that you do to fill up these institutions, because they're not going to go anywhere. We have to drown out their voices and their decisions and counteract their decisions. A good citizen is a patriot. Nope. Sometimes the best citizen is a critic. Social assistance deters people from working. Nope. It gives them stability that they need in order to think more in the long term and make decisions that would benefit not just themselves but their community and thus the state. So the thing is, if you're actually not if you're not like a social reactionary, or if you're not a social reactionary or a right wing, or just right wing, like just chasing profit is the ultimate thing, then you should want people to be able to have a stable quality of life, so they can continue to maintain the status quo of buying into the system and not criticizing it. It is necessary to massively invest in research to improve productivity. Agreed. The categories women and men are social constructs that should be given up. I disagree. There's always going to be innate differences between men and women, either whether based off of behavioral, performative elements or external elements, or internally because of biology. And that's going to vary, of course, between each individual man or woman. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think the thing with people who go really hard on the other side of this issue is that they think that conceding the validity of one perspective dismisses the validity of the other. It's a spectrum. You know what I'm saying? Like, we mostly live in grayscale. You know what I'm saying? Not black or white. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's validity to different arguments for different reasons, and it's not always going to be an even split. Sometimes it's going to be 70-30, maybe 60-40, 55-45, etc. So, I don't agree with that. Recognizing differences in people is not the problem. It's using those differences, it's framing those differences as being malicious, or negative in some type of fashion, destructive, to other groups. That's just ignorant. We're not, you know, even primates and shit don't act that fucking primitive. Bigotry and shit like that is something that is constructed, by human beings for a certain end. It doesn't happen by accident. Preserving non-urban ecosystems are more important than creating jobs. I get the sentiment. I mean, this is a straightforward question, but preserving non-urban ecosystems is more important than creating jobs. You know what? I mean, because just to be consistent with my argument earlier about having to scale down production, the population having to decrease, I'm going to go ahead and say agree that if the trade-off is decreasing the population through humanely, by improving the lives of those who can reproduce and giving them other options or incentives to put off childbearing or to do it more limitedly, having one or two children, then that's what needs to be done in order to preserving the ecosystem, so that way more people overall can enjoy living on this planet. All right, moving on. We're halfway there. It is necessary to avoid private monopoly. It's like I instinctively want to just say yes, but thinking in scenarios where certain people who like run the government or run like certain committees or whatever, right? And you think, okay, what if you had a great idea that was like considered subversive to the institutions, but you knew it was still valuable and could succeed, but that you were never going to get approval from the institutions and shit, or the government or whatever the fuck, a committee and shit, right? The established players in the game. And that to be able to do that, you're the only game in town that's left standing and shit, or the only one that's willing to go out and do that. It is necessary to avoid private monopoly. On the other hand, it's like monopolies in general. It's like if something becomes successful, there's going to be other people that want to come up and try to do that shit. So I'm actually going to say neutral hesitant on that. You know, because there are more people might want to come up into the space in which you opened up because you show that it could work. And then the question gets flipped because then it's like, okay, now you're asking as like the defender, you know what I'm saying, from this onslaught of change. And overall, I like changes. I like more people having skin in the game and being able to direct the conversation. Energy and transport structures must be public matter. Agreed. Heavy penalties are efficient because they are dissuasive. Nope. Because if you can just pay, you know what I'm saying, penalties and shit, then it gives a privilege to rich and just continues to press down on the poor. Banks should remain private. So something I heard in a person who took the test and posted a video of it, they said that where they live, there's a private banking system, but that it is heavily regulated. And I'm not aware of any controversies that they may have. It was Canada. It was a Canadian. And then they talked about how in the United States, how it's a complete fucking mess. And once again, the thing I say to that, it's not like we don't have laws and regulations and shit, but the people in charge, people are fucking weak and greedy. You know what I'm saying? And, so I don't know. I can't say or what if you're like, you belong to like a vulnerable group and, you know what I'm saying, you need banks, you know what I'm saying, you need loans or you need credits and whatnot, but none of the other institutions will fuck with you, but you can somehow manage to make your own. So I'm going to say neutral again. Excuse me. The right to be anonymous on the internet should be guaranteed. Ooh. No. I feel like there needs to be a constant pushback of, I don't believe in 100% transparency. I don't believe in 100% anonymity. So to say that it's guaranteed anonymity, I'm not going to say that. Sexual assaults are partly caused by men's natural impulse. No. It's like, do all people that have penises want to stick them in something? Well, the vast majority of them do. Yes, but does that mean we want to put them in something against or person's will? Does that mean we want to do that to something against the will of the individual or, otherwise sentient being? Then fuck no. Like, 'cause that's another thing. It's basically saying that men's primal sexual urge also means it's inevitable that rape or sexual assault will happen because of our innate sexual desires. No. I could jerk off till my fucking dick falls off before I rape somebody. Fuck's wrong with y'all? So no. But the thing is, you got to appreciate the fact that questions and ideas and shit are framed in a very straightforward way because, your first instinct may be like, oh, how dare they ask that question, or who are the people that wrote this? There are people who actually believe this, men and women, who think that men just are going to rape or assault, sexual assault. So it's just like, just, that's what they do. That's what we do. And I don't agree with that. So it's important to have to actually wrestle with the ideas and points of view that people actually have and point out, why they're, incorrect, and at least helping you understand really why they're wrong instead of just immediately going with the repulsion of, oh, how can you even ask me that? How can you even think that? Because there are people who think that. Reduction of waste should be done by reducing production. I absolutely agree. We don't need to be producing so much shit. We don't need to be continuing to feed infinite profits, infinite population growth, and all that. The population doesn't need to increase forever. Some sectors or type of employment should be financially supported. Yes. Minimal levels of salary should be ensured to make sure that a worker can live off his or her work. Yes. Social differences between ethnic groups cannot be explained by biology. I agree. The state should be abolished. I disagree. The state will always exist to some degree. It just will. And there are some things that can be done at the state level that are more effective or efficient than done in the private sector or in a communal or localized level. Sabotage is legitimate under certain conditions. Yes. The whole framing of this is that, like, sabotage is legitimate if you want to do it. Because nobody's going to sit there and say that, yes, you can sabotage my shit to ruin my plans or my efforts. So sabotage is one of those, it's like spying. You know what I'm saying? No matter how many rules, they put down on agreeing that or understanding that one another is going to spy on each other. You know what I'm saying? You never outright just say, yes, we're spying on you, or yes, please come and spy on us. So sabotage is legitimate under certain conditions. I get the framing, but it's I don't like the way that question is asked, the wording. It is necessary to remove regulations and labor legislation to encourage firms to hire. I disagree. Transhumanism will be beneficial because it would allow us to improve our capacities. So transhumanism, for people that don't know, it's basically like modifying the human body, like becoming like a cyborg and shit, where you have, like a fucking engine going on your heart. But the thing is, we already have. Think of all the other shit that we modify our bodies and stuff. Whether it's through surgery or through implants or even getting a cast or something to fix a broken limb or digit. So transhumanism is just like the next step in stuff related to like medicine and biology and engineering in that space. So transhumanism will be beneficial. I mean, it will be beneficial. It will have trade-offs. It will have unintended consequences. But I'll say I agree. The age of retirement should be lowered. Not quite. I feel like conditions for workers and the retirees should be better because we still have to. We still have a budget to work with. We still have, funds and whatnot. And of course, like the other side of that is taking more from the top and taking more from the 1% of people who have all this disproportionate wealth. But even taking that into account, you still got to spend the money correctly. So I just kind of see that as just, trying to be fiscally responsible. I don't think the age of retirement should be lowered. I don't know if it should be increased either, because it's 65 or 62 or something. So I'm not certain about that. I'll say it should be lowered. I'll disagree with that. It is better to arrest someone potentially dangerous preventively rather than taking the risk of having them committing a crime. Nah, that just sounds like Minority Report bullshit. Well, here's the thing: is that there's already. Here's the thing about police and detectives and shit. They always 90% of the time they go in to clean up messes. Most of their work is done after the crime is already committed, and we're aware, yes, of the surveillance and spying and stuff that they do. And like I said before, I understand that there's a certain amount of civil liberties, that will be compromised, because I do see surveillance and security and patrolling and stuff as necessary to a degree. Not in the way that we see it today, but I don't know. Because the thing is, I'm not sure what the context of this question is supposed to be. Is it the context of a terrorist attack being planned, and so you're on the lookout for certain words, or you're trying to infiltrate a certain group, or is it harassing and spying on activists and calling them identity extremists and whatnot because they want civil liberties and rights and shit? So I'm actually going to say neutral on that, hesitant. Members of a nation or culture can have some unchangeable characteristics that define them. So here's the thing. They're trying to mix up both, as if being a member of a nation, what does that fucking mean? I was born in a country? What if I was born there and then never lived there another day in my life? What if I moved to a place, when I'm 30 years old and I live to be 70? You know what I'm saying? So I spent more time in that country than I did anywhere else in my life before then. Am I not a national of that country? You know what I'm saying? Completely forget becoming nationalized through the legal system. That's one thing. And then they're also saying, member of a culture. Culture is dynamic and fluid, and people's practices change or don't change. But that's up to the individual on how much they want to comply with the shit. But the thing is, I feel like the premise of this question is there are certain things about people that can't be changed, and it relates to their national, i.e., ethnic origin, because that's oftentimes what it's alluding to, or their culture, and that just rings of bigotry and xenophobia and race and just social reactionary bullshit in general. So I'm gonna say disagree. In some specific conditions, the death penalty is justified. I'm going to agree, because overall, I don't like the idea of the death penalty. I would like it to not happen. At the same time, knowing some of the acts that are committed by people and they get away with it. I'm not just talking about street criminals. I'm talking about people like in our military and security, or, people like just rich, well-connected people like Jeffrey Epstein and shit and all his connects and stuff. It's like, ultimately, I don't have a problem with the fact that he died. I just don't like the fact that it happened before. You know what I'm saying? We could, bring down all the other people in his little black book. But, so I'm going to say, overall, I guess the way that I feel, yeah, sometimes the death penalty is justified. But at the same time, I hate the idea of even one innocent person being killed, for that in that process. We're almost there, folks. We're getting towards the last leg. Technological progress must not change society too quickly. I don't know. I mean, this oftentimes that's the argument that like conservatives or people that are like technophobes or don't really understand technology. Like the thing is, advances in technology or new shit is going to get invented. It's going to happen. Some of it's going to be good. Some of it's going to be bad. But and a lot of it's not going to even be be able to be controlled, because there's so many different processes that go into deciding how much of technology can even change a society. So I'm actually going to say neutral again. Prisons should no longer exist. Nope, sorry. Maybe you don't call them prisons. Maybe the infrastructure and the organization is completely different, but you're going to need a place to put motherfuckers who do wild shit. And yeah, you're just going to have to. Patents should not exist. Disagree. Patents are abused. And more people need to be fighting back against that, because we're always going to need laws to protect your ideas and be able to benefit from being the first one to, or not even being the first one, but being able to do something unique and make a genuine contribution that a lot of people find value in. There should be a way that you are rewarded for that and get a certain level of exclusivity to it. It's just being abused by certain individuals, well-connected, super rich individuals, and corporations who capture the government. Capture is a political term basically for buying up the government. So if you ever heard anybody saying the government or this individual was captured by this organization or by these interests, that's what that means. It pretty much just means they got bought out. So patents should not exist. I disagree. It's almost like saying intellectual property shouldn't exist. You know what I'm saying? And I don't agree with that. Euthanasia should be authorized. Yep. Nowadays, employees are free to choose when signing a contract with their future employer. Not really, no. Because if a Walmart or Amazon comes and shuts down all the local places and shit, including a place where you used to work at, or you might have seen an opportunity for yourself, and they are the only game in town, then in their mind they probably gave you a choice. Yeah, you can come work for anybody in town, and we're the only ones in town. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and say I disagree with that. No, I don't. I still don't believe, it's slavery, working for wage labor, but it definitely needs to be improved, and there definitely needs to be more investment in allowing people, or more opportunities for people to make a sustainable living outside of just working a job. But that also needs to exist. People need to stand up for their ideals, even if it leads them to betray their country. Absolutely. The values of my country are superior to those of other countries. Nope. Not because I don't think that there are certain values that make the United States unique in a very positive way, but there's also plenty of shit that's very negative, and I just don't like the idea of superiority in general. There's really just a sense of what I think is right or wrong, and how much that overlaps with other people around me. Citizens should take priority over foreigners. In what respects? Like, what, going to the hospital? I don't agree with that. Or like, what, being able to participate in the political sphere, and to what degree? Like, citizens should take. I'm gonna say neutral on that. I'm not exactly sure. It is legitimate for a country to intervene militarily to defend its economic interests. Yes. Or just its interests in general. Elections organized by the state cannot question the powers in place. Disagree. I do not have problem if any other languages are added to or replace the already existing official language in my country. I agree. We should accept changes in our way of consuming food to limit the exploitation of nature. I agree. The maximum allowed hours in the legal work week should be increased. Fuck no. They should be decreased. The selfishness is the overriding drive. Wait. Hold on a second. The maximum allowed hours in the legal work. I feel like, here's the way I'll put it. What a person could earn, the wage in the United States has been stagnant for decades, while productivity has gone up and the profits for the owners and the well-connected and shit have gone up. So that's one issue. So there's so much wealth that should have, quote unquote, trickled down, to the working masses. So we can't just work our way, into the next echelon. You got to be invited by an insider. The maximum allowed hours, and plus I don't like the framing as if to encourage workaholic, just being a workaholic, or just hustle culture. I'm not with that shit. You know what I'm saying? I like the idea of earning. Right now, I like the idea of earning a 40-hour, like what I make right now whatever I would make for 40 hours of work per week, I feel like that's what I should be making for like 25 hours of the labor that I do for my job. And it's not because I think the work that I do is so much more valuable, but just because of the back pay, basically, for all the wealth that has been hoarded over this time. That's it. We should all be making a lot more than what we are. 99% of people who are going to hear this shit, you should be getting paid a lot more. Not because of who you are, what you've done, but just because of keeping up with actual economic progress. Simple as that. The maximum allowed hours in the legal work week should be increased. I absolutely disagree. People should be working less, not more. Selfishness is the overriding drive in the human species, no matter the context. I absolutely disagree. I absolutely disagree. Even if you're doing something to the benefit of other people for yourself, to give yourself a boost of pride or recognition or anything like that, what's the actual impact of your actions? It's improving people's lives? Okay, whatever. I don't care. If all you wanted was money or fame out of it, that's whatever. I don't give a fuck. It is acceptable that there are rich and poor people. I'm going to... Well, yeah, this is highly contextual. Does poor mean... Because what does rich and poor mean? Does poor mean still being able to like have like access to basic resources? Here's what I'll put it as. In our current system, everything is based off of how much money you have. So if you don't have any money, you can starve, you can be homeless, you can, whatever, not be able to bathe and shit. That is what is acceptable in society. The underpinning of the U.S. society in many respects is if you don't have any money, or it's fuck you, pay me. If you don't have any money, if you can't, break me off a few bills for something, then you're not entitled to human dignity or certain services and goods. And I don't agree with that. It is so to say it's acceptable that there are rich and poor people. There will always be disparity in wealth, for various reasons. But I don't feel like it should just be so laissez-faire about it. Or I'm not laissez-faire about it. It's something that should be avoided in most circumstances. Or better yet, I'll put it like this. Nobody should be able to go around and get their second plate till everybody's got their first plate. Does that work? Activism in existing political organizations is not relevant to change society. I absolutely disagree. Like the example I gave with like judges and whatnot. The only way to counteract that is to go in and swamp, overpower their voice and their actions by having so many other opposing judges who would rule against or reverse any of their decisions, of the opposing judges' decisions. That's this game. Unless you're talking about just completely dismissing the whole institution and building it up from scratch, which I'm not really with that argument. This isn't fucking, we're not storming the Bastille here, Biologically, human beings are designed for heterosexuality. No, that biological determinism bullshit. It is a small group that consciously and secretly controls the world. No, it's a small group that blatantly controls the world. They do the shit right in front of us and don't have to do too much to hide it. Differences of treatment and quality of life in our society show that racism is still omnipresent, and so is transphobia, homophobia, fucking misogyny and sexism, intolerance for different religious sects or non-religious sects, etc. Abstinence should be preferred to contraception to preserve the true nature of the sexual act. Nope. It is not acceptable that human action should lead to extinction of the species. Honestly, that's something that's just going to happen, unfortunately. That's just competition between species, and yes, the amount of species that are being killed in the name of quote unquote human progress and development and whatnot, and just this infinite loop of increased productivity and population growth, that's a problem that needs to be curtailed. At the end of the day, it's like we're also the last Homo sapiens. There was at least half a dozen other hominid species or two-legged species that were like us, and they're gone. You know what I'm saying? And that's just what it is. You know what I'm saying? That's just what happens. It is not acceptable. So to say it's not acceptable, but I also don't want to just say disagree and be like, no, some species are going to go extinct, to just deal with it. No, it should be avoided, but it's also going to happen to some degree. Nobody is by nature predisposed to criminality. I agree. Sexual orientation is a social construct. No. The purpose of the judiciary system should be to punish those who went against the law. No, it should be to punish and or offer. It should be to offer a chance for that person to make amends for the wrongs that they've done. So I'm gonna say disagree just because it's too myopic and there should be a level of punishment depending on the crime or whatnot, but sometimes the punishment is just being taken out of society and being isolated. So I am equally concerned about the inhabitants of my country as those of other countries. I agree. I consider myself internationalist, which means I'm just concerned with humankind across the globe. All sciences, even chemistry and biology, are not absolute and are subject to being shaped by our society. I mean, if you mean as far as like contributions that can be made or discoveries that can be made, sure. But if you're saying like maybe in a more postmodern sense that people who aren't specialized in chemistry and biology can just all of a sudden decide how valid or invalid it is, to me, because to me that just leaves room for like the whole pseudoscience bullshit or like flat eartherism or anti-vaxxerism. So I'm kind of iffy on that. I'm gonna say neutral. The police should be armed. Oh fuck. I mean, dude, in the United States, the cat's already out the bag. There's more guns in this country than people. If the police aren't armed and shit, that's gonna be a problem. That's gonna be a bigger problem than what it is now. Because as fucked up as they are now, imagine if they couldn't legally be armed and all the motherfuckers who do have guns could just run up on everybody in their neighborhood who they know doesn't have any. Or just go roaming, you know what I'm saying, through ransacking different towns. So, and also I'm taking this more abstractly to think that there's always going to be a need for some people whom can do that, can be the police. There's always going to be a need for that to some degree. It's just that at the same time, we can be super critical of how it plays out in the world in which we live in. So should the police be armed or any type of like body that is responsible for maintaining whatever law and order means for you in that situation? Sure. The influence of religion should decrease. I absolutely agree with that. I'm not going to force you to leave religion, but I would really, but I'm going to give you every reason why I think you should. Hormonal differences can explain some differences in individual characteristics between men and women. I agree. Looking for one's own profit is healthy for the economy. It can be both. So I'm going to say neutral. Abortion should be limited to specific cases. It already is. There's already limitations on abortion. Yeah, it's already limited. So I'll just say I agree. State-run companies should be managed like private ones and follow the logic of the market. No! Then what's the point? Then what is the fucking point? Then they're all just working to the benefit of one another. Then that's fucking fascism. The state working along with private interests It's the state and corporations, free market capitalism, working together to create this self-sustaining cycle of grift. You know what I'm saying? And corruption that just keeps one together. And a lot of people, I know you're thinking of fascism, you just think of Hitler. That was Nazism. Nazism is a flavor, a variety of fascism, but the overall thing of how fascism functions is that you need obviously it's a hyper-nationalism, a lot of male chauvinism, reverence for the military and authority and hierarchy, but to keep those things together, you need a formal state that is strong and that people can feel that and exerts values that the people think they can identify with. And then also it needs to be well funded so that way it can provide all the luxuries and comforts and shit that are needed to keep people, to reward people for their loyalty and shit. So no, this is just fascism. If two countries have similar economies, social systems, and environmental norms, then the free market between them has no negative impact. No. No to the free market, and no to this idea that just because two countries or two people or two entities of any kind, just because they share certain similarities, everything is going to be all hunky-dory between them. That's bullshit. People are fuck-ups. People are greedy. People are short-sighted. People are not perfect, and people are corporations, they're individuals, they're families, they're everything. So there's no space and no ways in which we can't fuck up. So expect us to do so. Expect yourself to do so. Order and authority should be respected in all circumstances. Changing the system radically is counterproductive. We should rather transform it progressively. No. But at the same, this is a nuanced issue because, of course, it's not 100%. Some things need to be progressed slowly. Some things need to be just thrown out altogether. So I'm going to say neutral, hesitant, because it's not really clear. And this is actually exactly what I got earlier. Equality, humanity, revolution. Let me zoom in. Wait, can I zoom in on this? Or maybe I can view image. There we go. So equality, humanity, revolution. Let me pull up. So here's the one I got earlier. Let me go ahead and zoom in on that a bit. Oh, actually, it's here's a slight difference. The first time I took the test, it was equality, revolution, humanity. And this one was equality, humanity, revolution. So let's go ahead and look through this one and see how it measures up with the one that I did earlier. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and bring this down. Oops, shit. Make sure I'm keeping everything still within the borders of the video recorder. Wait, can I not pull down the bottom? Oh, yeah. Okay. And then go to this one, and I don't want it to be that small. God damn it. Ugh. That looks awful. But well. All right. That's pretty. All right. This is good enough. Good enough. All right. So, how does this stack up to the first one? So in the first one I got, it's equality, revolution, humanity. And on the first issue, it's constructivism, 67%, neutral, 16%, and then 17% essentialism. Essentialism is short for like biological essentialism. And this is relating more to those questions about like gender and sex and like, oh, is it a social construct or is it something within you? I do feel as if there is a certain, so basically what this is saying is that there's I believe that we are mostly coming to this world, as far as gender and sex are concerned, being what we are, and that people aren't born like criminals or to do a specific thing, but that there are some innate differences between us in different factors, and those shouldn't be ignored. But I see them as really small. Now, in the equality, humanity, revolution one, I got still mostly constructivism. It's a little lower, 55 as opposed to 67%, neutral 24%, and a little more essentialism. Now, moving on to rehabilitative justice versus punitive justice. On the second go around, I got 43% rehab, 26% neutral, 31% punitive. I do believe in a certain level of punitive justice. And that was actually higher than what I got before in the one with humanity at the end. Rehab justice was actually only 36%, neutral was 43%, and punitive justice was 21%. So the neutral was actually I was less sure on my second go around about certain issues. So on actually, yeah. All right, yeah, that's fine. That's cool. And then on social issues, progressivism versus conservatism, I don't think there's any surprise there. They were basically the same. 50%, 52%, 24%, 27%, 26%, 21% for conservatism. So they were more or less the within a few points of one another. Not a big deal. Not surprising. Internationalism versus nationalism. Or, internationalism is just how you see people who don't belong to your nation, or identify with you nationally. That was, the first go around was 50%, 26% for unsure, and then 24% nationalism. And then the second go around, it was within like 5 points. It kind of shifted around a little bit, but it's still overall international bent versus nationals. Ooh, here's ooh, Ooh, interesting, very interesting. Y'all gonna like this. So peep this. Now we get down to some of the hardier issues, or some still hardier issues. The first time around when I took this test, my communism versus capitalism, like economics scale, was 33% communism, 29% neutral, 38% capitalism. So I was actually kind of almost equally communist and capitalistic, with almost a little less than a third, just under 30% of being unsure. Now in the second go around, the neutral figure is actually lower. Or excuse me, the neutral figure is actually the same. And guess what one suffered in the second time I went around? It was communism. I don't know. Maybe I've just internalized capitalism too much, or maybe it was once again from the framing of the questions, or maybe that really just is how I am. Maybe when it comes down to it, there's if I could construct society ideally, maybe wherever capitalism represents the economy now, it's so over. It's in everything. So 40. I think any other percentage besides like 99% would be an improvement. But yeah, but like almost half. What I'm saying, of my ideology, my economic ideology, according to this test, supports capitalism. 29% is actually unsure, and then only 26% of me, according to this test, believes in the communist way of doing things. And so let's move on to the next one. So the second time I went around this test, regulationism versus laissez-faire, which in business just means like, environmental regulations, like monitoring shit and red tape and stuff like that, right? They're actually exactly the same. 74% in favor of regulation in both cases, except in oh wow. So the first time I took the test, it was 74% in favor of regulation, 26% neutral, and then nothing in laissez-faire. Nothing at all. Obviously, that's a little, extreme or whatever. I think just looking at that now. But I'm also kind of surprised at the capitalism-communism thing. But, like I said, I'm not against private markets and shit. It just shit needs to be more highly regulated and actually followed through on, and have motherfuckers who aren't just worried about getting money in the process. Oh, ecology versus productivism. The second go around, actually, I think they're exactly the same. Oh, nope. You know what? The second time I went around, 43% in favor of looking at the ecology first, 19% neutral, 38% productivity. In the first time I went around, productivity is still 38%, but I was a little more neutral or unsure about issues by about 5%, and so it was only 38% of looking out for the ecosystem. And then revolution versus reform. In both cases, revolution, it's not even close. And the thing is, I think this just goes to show that, like, with these tests, and because they varied up the questions, even though I'm still on the left, I'm on the left, is that depending on the scenario, depending on the perspective, depending on the framing, depending on the issue at hand, it'll vary somewhat. You know what I'm saying? But with few exceptions, these were mostly the same, and there wasn't more than maybe 5 or 6 points difference on difference between the way I felt about certain issues, with the exception of communism versus capitalism, where communism lost 7 points and capitalism gained those 7 points in favor of how to run the economy and shit. So, but this is a cool, I like these tests, political ideology tests. Not because, like I said, I'm gonna all of a sudden go around, waving this flag or calling myself, an equal humanist revolutionary or whatever the fuck, or some type of proxy, but just giving me a ballpark of where my ideas stand, hearing certain perspectives, and having to consider different ways of doing things, other than where they are. That's probably the biggest benefit, is just saying, hey, do you think this thing should be that way? And then all of a sudden it gets you thinking like, why should or shouldn't it? Hopefully it does. So, but this is Samboy, Politiscales, .net. If you want to take the test for yourself, I'd suggest doing it a couple of times. It takes them, yeah, it's just interesting. It just helps give us a barometer on where your head is at, and maybe expand your curiosity to understand more about different perspectives and different ways in which we can organize society. So, talk to y'all later.